teaching you the art of industrial real estate. This is On Air with Team Jensen.
Sorry. All right. Hello, listeners. Welcome to episode 23 of On Air, the art of industrial real estate with Team Jensen. Today we have a couple more brothers with us, in Jack and Bobby Caffrey. Thank you for coming on with us, guys.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you guys for having us.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I'll introduce you guys and let you kind of then take it from there and introduce yourselves a little bit and tell your background. But Jack, you're the CFO with RX Savings Solutions here in town. And Bob, you are the president of ChopAir. So two kind of, different worlds, you might say, but still really curious to dive into each industry you're in today and just kind of go from there. So, Jack, we'll let the older brother go first. If you want to jump into kind of your background with RX Saving Solutions, and then also kind of what what led you to there.
Yeah. So I'll actually answer that in reverse a little bit. So I was born and raised in Kansas City. Went to Rockhurst, then Mizzou. Graduated from Mizzou, then accounting degree. Went to EY for a few years. Left EY, went to a small company that my buddy and his dad had started that sells and rents semi-truck trailers. And, they had, they were on a really messy instance at QuickBooks. They, had employees that were literally still punching like paper time cards. They did not have health insurance. So I kind of went in and I got them health insurance. I got them on a cloud-based timekeeping system, kind of modernize their HR processes. I got them off QuickBooks onto something that was the industry standard for them. It took about 9 months, and after that, I was like, all right, you guys don't need a full-time CPA here. You have 15 employees. I'm going to go on to do something else. While I was at EY, kind of backing up a little bit, my main client at that time was Blue KC. So I was kind of familiar with the health insurance industry. So then when I'm transitioning out of US Trailer, the trailer rental company, I go and have coffee, breakfast, et cetera, with various board members and CFOs around Kansas City that were part of other companies, some of them startups, and one of them was RX Savings Solutions, and I met Frank Bednar, who was CFO at the time, at a Starbucks on College, and we hit it off pretty fast. And the things that he really liked were my experience at Blue KC. Blue KC was a client of theirs. They were also an investor. So my work at EY on Blue KC was really relevant, and then he also was on QuickBooks and wanted to get off of it, and so a lot of the stuff that I did at US Trailer in those 9 months were actually really relevant also. So he was like, all right, great. 2 days later, I had a job offer. So
Sweet.
So I went over there as a financial analyst, and the first 2 or 3 years were kind of getting the accounting processes and financial forecasting processes kind of started more or less. Frank had, he had done a pretty good job by himself of getting things going and getting the books closed every month, but kind of building out some more formal standard operating procedures. And then after, at the time when I started there, we closed the books with I think $5 million of revenue that year, and fast forward to now we're doing over 100. So that was 7 years ago when I started. So just crazy growth. So we're kind of building the plans, we're flying and implementing new softwares and processes. I can keep up with the business. And then about 2 or 3 years in, I get tapped on the shoulder, and Frank says, we're looking at who's going to own this company next, and we need your help kind of going through diligence and the process and all that. So that is what kicked off that, and where my growth really accelerated was going through that and talking to other executives and higher ups at private equity firms about the company, and ultimately selling the business in 2022. So yeah, it's kind of high level background.
Very cool. Very cool.
Bob, you want to go ahead?
Bobby?
Yeah, so everything's the same as Jack until we got to Mizzou, and I went down the engineering path instead of the accounting path or finance path. That's kind of what everyone in my family did. So I did mechanical engineering, minored in business and mathematics. And I've always been very entrepreneurial. But when I got out of school, I decided to go work for a company called Ruskin, which is a Johnson Controls company. They manufacture dampers and louvers. And tell you the truth, I really did not like fluid dynamics in college, but I think a lot of that had to do with my professors and kind of my drive in college to pay attention.
Maybe a little bit of
class.
YouTube.
Yeah. But I ended up really enjoying it, and I'm just always been a grinder, and so I just worked my tail off there. And then it was a year into that, boss tapped me on the shoulder and was like, hey, I'm going to go over to run this company. And out of Atlanta, I need to hire 12 sales managers. He's like, do you want to be a sales manager? We're going to be selling this company called Big Ass Fans. And actually, he didn't say company. I thought he was just talking about large ceiling fans.
Yeah.
Or not even ceiling fans, just fans. But I was like, yeah, I'm down. And so he gave me all these options. I was like, Miami. And so signed the paperwork, signed my life away, and go down there. It was actually kind of funny when we got to Miami. It was the week the Chiefs were playing in the Super Bowl there. And I was with my mom, and I was like, I don't know if I like this. And so we drove an hour up to Fort Lauderdale. I was like, all right, this is more of my jam. And so I moved there, started selling. COVID hit. I moved there in February. March, like COVID ramped up.
Yeah.
But we're still selling. The leads were coming in. I was getting 5 to 15 leads a day, and just driving around the Southeast Florida. And every time I'd make a sale, I really liked the sales path. You know, you get that instant gratification, and then customers were always really happy if the fans worked. And I saw this just huge trajectory to like these huge ceiling fans in industrial. I mean, and people need them. You know, most of the time you're not going to air condition these spaces because it's just not economical. And so I got really into the installation side of it with an electrical contractor there, Bob Kozik, who did all the work for Costco's. And he would teach me everything about it, what type of circuit, how to even read a panel, like how much amperage is available on it, what circuit breaker you need. Are we going to do MC cable, or you know, what type of, or do we need rigid going up, and how to price it up. And really saw a flaw in the installation practice at Big Ass Fans because you just go on Salesforce and be like, yo, it's a 1-fan installer, 4-fan, and then next thing you know, you're out of the loop on the installation. The contractor shows up and it's like, I'm not running cable this far for this price, and then you get into change orders, and and so then the guy Bob Kozik, who I was working with, was like, Bob, you got to look at these Entramatic fans, which is Epic fans. They rebranded. He's like, I install them in every Costco. They're easier to install, better value, cheaper. They got same warranties or better, and so
They're just as effective too.
yeah. So and times more effective.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to a few people, even my boss, and I was like, hey, what do we used to sell before Big Ass converted to the third-party sales model? He's like, well, these Entramatic fans, they were great, but Big Ass goes, you want $60 million a year in sales to start selling ours. So obviously they said yes. And Big Ass was doing that all around the country, that third-party sales model. And then there's another company called Green Hack, and they had just come out with their fan, and they're a powerhouse in the industry. And I started asking some of the Green Hack reps, I was like, what do you guys used to sell? And they're like, oh, these Entramatic fans, they were awesome. So a light bulb went off, and I was like, oh my gosh, this Epic fans out of Dallas or Entramatic must have lost their nationwide distribution overnight from Green Hack coming out with the fan and Big Ass going to the third-party sales model. Sure enough, I was right. I rolled the die. I was 24 at the time, flying around the country, making up stories about like, oh, I'm going to meet with my marketing company in Dallas. I'd love to meet with you guys. It's like, I wasn't meeting with no marketing company. And okay, we'll do a meeting. And so I ended up getting all Florida, and I was still living in Fort Lauderdale. And and I was like, hey, I'm from Kansas City. There's some huge, it's like the mecca of mechanical engineers and just engineering in general. It Burns McDonnell, Henderson, Black and Veatch, all these smaller engineering firms. I was like, can I have that too? And they're like, yeah. And so when I got that, I was like, okay, they must have really lost their nationwide distribution. And so everything started going pretty well. I moved back to Kansas City. I moved my really good friend Greg Vaughn from Mizzou to Tampa. He started managing Florida. I started running things out of Kansas City. Ended up getting a warehouse here in the West Bottoms. And then hired a guy out in Houston. Texas has been a really great market for us. And now we've been really expanding our line card. Really wanted to diversify, so we jumped into heating. So that's been like a really big focus of mine, even just the knowledge behind it, because that's what sells in this industry. So now we've been in business for 4 years, 3 months, and so that's the story. So now I'm an HVAC guy.
Very much so, yeah.
Very cool. Well, and you guys, obviously, your companies are doing very different things, and I know you guys are 2 of 4 brothers, and you guys are all in kind of various professions that all somewhat tie together. But I'm sure you've had some cool opportunities to run things by each other and kind of just see how would you handle this, or what are you seeing here, and I'm sure with your brother having helped 2 different companies that have we're looking to kind of come up to the modern age. Has it been helpful as you've been creating your own business to kind of bounce things off of him and use his expertise?
Yeah, you have the shittiest accounting system ever. It's like, actually, you don't even have an accounting system. It's like, let me set you up with a computer in my basement. You don't come up until you've gone through all your bank statements of this card and that card and figure it the hell out. So, no, it's been extremely helpful having Jack and then my brother Chris, who's your very, very good friend, Kurt, in that finance role of the business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Bobby is a founder of a ceiling fan business. I am the CFO of a software business, but the parallels are actually there's more of them than you'd think. Just because like Bobby being in his position of the founder, he oversees the whole company. He sees all the operations. He knows how the whole thing works. Being in finance, and especially like the head of a finance department, you also get the luxury of kind of seeing how all the cogs and everything move within a business, where the money flows. So, like Bobby, for example, like if he has an HR issue, like I can kind of advise him on that. If he has an operational issue, like I kind of can help with that too. So like, even though they're different roles and different kinds of companies, just they both have that broad view of a business to where, like he can leverage me, I can leverage him if needed. So it has actually been pretty complimentary.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, business is business, and people are people, and people run business. So,
yeah. Well, and to backtrack a little bit, you mentioned I'm good friends with your brother Chris, and the 4 of us were all at Mizzou together. I don't think all 4 of us were there at the exact same time, but we definitely all overlapped, which was a lot of fun. So, MIZ, which it's been nice. It's nice having some Tigers on the podcast because we've had a few Jayhawks too.
Yep, no doubt.
Do you have any crack it open questions? So today we are running a little early today, so we are not going to be actually cracking beers, but in an effort for our sponsor, Martin City, we'd still like to crack it open today.
Well, I got to be honest. I know Chris. I don't know the 4th brother.
Tim.
Yeah.
I just picked him up from the airport last night.
Yeah. Tim's the only one that wasn't a beta.
Okay. Yes, I forget. All right. Yeah. Good deal.
He was a pipe, a little different.
I think he was a class behind you.
A lot of I've been working with little brother here for almost 2.5 years, and it's been humbling learning the business from Kurt, but we've had a lot of fun, but we've also identified how different we operate in a lot of ways, which it's been a good yin to the yang, and we have some good synergies, but there's also the competition with the brothers still, and I was curious if you guys had a little bit of that, I'm sure, growing up, and who maybe was maybe the one always needling somebody, and who was the one trying to maybe weather the situation a little bit and be a little less, because I always like to yell through our yelling matches with the siblings that I was the least confrontational one, but there was always a lot of contention growing up.
Chris definitely was the one that weathered everything.
Okay.
I would say that me and Bobby are definitely alphas, and Tim to some extent. Chris may be the only one that's not a true alpha.
I mean, Chris would probably defend himself.
I'm sure you don't know.
What? Oh, he'll be listening.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll tune in. Yeah.
Well, and I know, your dad's with Country Club Bank, and how has that banking relationship been helpful for you guys in your career, in your careers as you have gotten going?
It's been highly beneficial.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when I mentioned that, when I was moving on from U.S. Trailer, I went to meet with a number of CFOs and board members of companies around town. Like, it was really my dad opening up his Rolodex and saying, here's my network of people. Like, go email them. He would make some warm intros, and I would take it from there. So like I would not have found RX Savings without him.
Yeah, and those people will give you the time of the day because of your dad's reputation and connection, and
Right.
Yeah.
And then even when I was at US Trailer, like they wanted a new debt facility, and Country Club Bank, it wasn't a great fit for my dad's bank, but he knew the banker in town that does those kind of businesses.
Right.
So like
Right.
I think they still have a credit facility this day with that bank. When I went over to RX Savings, they were with a different bank. They needed a new line of credit. Guess what? We brought Country Club in. Like it was pretty simple. So they've that relationship has definitely been good for me.
That's cool.
And Bob,
Yeah.
are you do you do your
big
banking
time.
with
Yes,
Country Club? Yeah.
No, I'm not with Country Club.
Okay.
He makes sure
That's
that
good.
family and business stay separate. Like, I mean, Jack was a different situation because like he didn't own the company; he worked for the company, and so.
Right.
But for me, I think it was in 2021, I got my first SBA loan with the bank. I'm going to leave their name out of it. Let's just say it's kept growing. And then I'm like, all right, I need a line of credit. We're growing. I need some access to capital to be buying inventory. And then they're like, no, all we do are 7, 8 loans. When I was like, okay, so I'm just going to go over to this bank and start working with them. They're like, well, no, you'd have to have the lien release to even start working with them. So I'm like, oh, so like I'm totally handcuffed right now. It's like, I don't have the money right now to pay off this loan, but I can't even start working with another bank for what I need until I pay this thing off. So then, sure enough, David Caffrey was like, all right, you should go talk to this guy.
Right.
I'll warm it up. And then that started going really well. And then I had actually made a couple other of my own relationships out there with bankers. And then when it got to deal time, he was just like, all right, now you go back and do this. You go back and do this. And he wrote up the loan memo for me. So that's what I delivered to the banks. And they're like, wow, you just did all this for us? Like that was our next step when you apply for a loan. So
That's awesome.
That's the type of consultant he is on a pro bono basis.
Yeah, very cool.
Frankly, I think it's why I live in Kansas City. I mean,
Yeah.
Timmy and Chris, who live in Chicago, are doing great on their own. But when I was thinking about like, do I move back home? Do I look for jobs elsewhere? I was like, why would I have this great network in Kansas City.
Yeah.
My dad has this
Right.
incredible network. Like, why would I go somewhere and build a network from scratch?
Right.
Like, it's kind of already, the foundation's already laid here. So like, let's just build on top of it.
Right. No, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of how I felt too. And especially, I came to work at Kessler Hunter with my dad. And so part of me was defensive early on. It's like, I don't want people to think I'm just having this all handed to me. But, you learn over time that anyone in that role that really wants to take it and build upon it, it's great to have the opportunity there, but you still have to go and do it yourself. And it sounds like you guys have both leveraged that relationship really well. And his, like Stuart said, his reputation in town. And I think it's only, a wise thing to do is to go and take advantage of the opportunity you have and use your network.
Well, not only that, but I mean, obviously, Kansas City has been trending up for the last decade.
Yeah.
I mean, that's helped.
That conveniently happened at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a
lot of positive reasons to be here lately.
It's been a fruitful place to live over the last 10, 15 years, that's for sure.
No doubt.
It wasn't
Yeah.
exactly like that when we were little kids.
Yeah.
Well,
For me,
and
as I drained my bank account getting the business started, I was like, well, they don't have a bed in Florida I could go sleep in.
That helps
So
too.
it's like,
A roof over the head,
I
yeah.
better live in Kansas City, so this thing goes to shit. I have a little fall plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I learned something that I think Kurt already knew, but running into your dad Dave at Development Day last week. He informed me that the Caffrey family history goes way back to the Union Station massacre, and that affected your guys' family directly with your great grandfather, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And your grandfather was only 6 at the time, I think Dave said. But that's wild. It's just funny to think about the spider web and how it sounds like your grandfather moved out of Kansas City for a while, but then he and your grandmother came back to Kansas City,
Yeah,
and
from
that's
Omaha.
and that's
And it's
and
like
then
the railroad what got us here.
Yeah.
That's how long ago.
right,
So.
yeah.
So we're literally staring at the location of
Right.
where that happened. Yeah, he was my great grandfather was murdered in the Union Station massacre.
Yeah, that's wild.
And I mean, there's still a plaque out front at
Yeah, that's-
Union Station with his
That's-
name
that's
on
what he
it.
mentioned,
There's
yeah.
a conference room named after him at the local FBI headquarters here.
Yeah, so I went to that. That was really cool. So the FBI had us go to their grand opening of their new building by the airport. And just a little bit of context. So my great-grandfather, Special Agent Raymond J. Caffrey, was transporting Pretty Boy Floyd, or as you know, Frank Nash, from Union Station to Leavenworth Prison when his gang showed up, and it turned into a fire battle. And if you look up that Union Station massacre, the famous picture where you see the bullet hole like blown out of the glass of the car, well, that was our great-grandfather driving that car. And but we got the opportunity to go before the ribbon cutting. They showed us the whole thing, the conference room they named after him, and sat there with the director, Christopher Ray, for about 30 minutes and talking to him. And like what the thing he was saying is the most monumental thing about this whole thing was that the FBI agents weren't allowed to carry guns.
That's right.
And then he got murdered, and then that's why. That set it
kidding.
all up
Wow.
for them to start carrying guns. And so then I asked him, I was like, man, that happened 91 years ago. Why are we still sitting here? Like, why are you treating us like this? And he's like, because it's very simple. We want everyone to know that serves us at the FBI. If anything happens to you, we'll take care of your families for the rest of your life, which was incredible.
wild.
That was crazy to hear.
It's
Yeah.
wild. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the Bureau basically raised my grandfather and took care of his mom.
Yeah. Well, and it's just wild to think too, and just knowing how many Caffreys are running around Kansas City, because your grandfather proceeded to come back to Kansas City and have 8 sons, right?
Yes.
All boys.
So thank God that your grandfather was 6 years old when that happened, and it wasn't pre your grandfather,
Yeah.
because otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here.
Right.
So it's crazy to think about.
I know.
I mean, just the butterfly effect, if you will, almost. But yeah, it's a really cool story. I had no idea. I had no idea.
Yeah, I remember Chris mentioning that back in college at one point, and I was like, what? Like, yeah, you feel like you read about that in like a textbook, and just to hear that it's directly ties to your family is wild. But
Yeah.
but no, and so just to go on like a different path, I was just kind of curious. You guys talking about Chris and Tim. Do you ever think you guys will get, talking about your grandpa coming back to town? Do you guys think you'll ever pull them back to town and just create a monopoly of Caffrey-run companies here in town?
Yeah, we have talked about starting a firm called Caffrey, and Caffrey. We've even talked about bringing one of my cousins in and adding a 5th Caffrey to that name. But yeah, Timmy, he is deepening his roots in Chicago, so I'm not sure if that will happen. And Chris is about to get married to a St. Louis girl, so we hope to bring him back to the right side of the state of Missouri at some point. But
Right.
I've got some
time will
things
tell.
brewing.
Some things planned. Yeah.
Well, I hope you keep brewing them, because I know I know Chris. I always thought would end up in Kansas City, but to your point, with the future St. Louis bride, I think it might be tough to win that battle. But
Right.
you never know. You never know.
I want it. My wife's from St.
You
Louis,
know-
but I don't know. Like it's
Yeah.
that the success rate there is not always great.
Yeah. That's
Tim and Molly were planning on it, and then, Molly's family's from Winona, Minnesota, which is really close to Chicago, and they're kind of rooted in Chicago. She's got a brother there, and she's got a family there. And then Tim got just a really awesome opportunity to take over a guy's book of business and commercial mortgage there. And as you guys know, in sales, when you build a book of business,
huge.
Somewhere, it's like you really just leave it.
You don't walk away
it's
from
like,
that.
You don't walk, especially in a market like Chicago.
No kidding,
Big
right,
market like that. So I think they got pretty okay with just they bought a house there. They're having a baby here soon. That's why they're in town
for them.
for a baby
Cool.
shower. And Chris, on the other hand, he his company RT Specialty that he works for, he loves it. The good thing is they don't have a location in St. Louis. If you're hearing this RT Specialty, don't you open up in St. Louis. But yeah, I think that they're having fun right now. If you go visit them, Chicago's
a
It's a great time.
Yeah.
So I don't mind them. Just stay living there. I mean,
Right,
Chris,
right.
if you're gonna stay somewhere, just stay there because they'll make a.
Buy bigger houses with more extra bedrooms. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
keep it up.
Free place to stay.
All right.
It's a good place to visit, and they've got a good community there. I know when I've visited, they've got. I mean, it feels like there's plenty of Kansas City and Mizzou there, and they've built a good network of friends. And
It's a lot of fun.
Mizzou really exported a lot of talent to Chicago,
Oh, yeah.
especially around the time that we were there. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of those,
Yeah.
a lot of those good folks are still up there.
Yeah, no, that's how. I mean, I feel like there might even be more folks there than St. Louis with a lot of my friend group. Our sister, her and her husband
several
lived there
years
for
there.
7 years, I think. So, I mean, I think it's a great place. It's kind of like the big city of the Midwest, if you
Right.
will.
It
so
is, yeah.
it's a fun time. But
We, kind of touched on the last decade run that Kansas City has been on. What do you guys think, over the next several years here on the horizon as we get into, World Cup and it sounds weird saying it out loud, but approach 2030, I mean, every year it feels normal when you're in the year, but when you talk about 5 years out, it just sounds weird saying 2030. But what do you guys, are you feeling optimistic and, about what's on the horizon with Kansas City and your market and your world? And, certainly we've been put on the national map way more than we were when we were growing up.
But look, how could you not be? Feel optimistic about KC right now. I mean, the new airport is so awesome. I think that doesn't get talked about enough. That's been so big for us. And then you look at these plans, like what's going on along the river. For the longest time, we're like the only city that wasn't utilizing our riverfront, and now it's exploding right now, which is so cool. And then what we're doing in the West Bottoms, we haven't even seen what's happening there. I mean, once that Rock Island Bridge opens up, I mean, we're just getting so many cool pockets of the city just emerging. And I think what's really going to cap it all off is the cap, the I-70 cap. That thing is going to be so cool. And you just saw 4 Light get announced. I mean, and they're just going to, once that cap's built, they have plans to go on both sides of it. I mean, it is becoming a really cool downtown. And then you have the plaza, taking new ownership, which needed to happen. And I'm hearing that they're having the right conversations to bring like a Houston's back and to really make it just that. Yeah. Oh my!
that local flavor,
Yeah.
A million
Is
percent.
at Chop, are you distributing all over the country?
Yeah, I mean, yes, Texas, Florida a lot. We've got some national accounts, but Kansas City's our biggest market.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm being told from our customers or mechanical contractors, yes, it's starting to go down right now. But I think we will see it to pick up, interest rates going down, and because if you start penciling stuff, you won't see it for 2 years. So I mean, but yeah, I mean, I'm hearing about leases happening. I mean, mainly right now, it's all build to suit.
Yep.
We're fortunate that we're getting in that action.
For sure.
But yeah, I drive down the highway and I'm like, oh, that's a good spot for industrial. That's a good spot. It's like, sure enough, it's gonna be. So
Yeah, no doubt.
it'll keep growing.
No doubt.
Yeah, I think the revitalization of the plaza is critical. Seems to be moving in the right direction, and then obviously the talk of the town is the baseball stadium, where that's going to go.
Yeah.
Hopefully it goes somewhere in this plane of view that I have in front of me right now.
Right.
That would be ideal. So I think key to continuing the economic success and the development success in Kansas City is going to be just continuing to have successful businesses grow here.
Yeah.
I think we run a little bit of risk with Cerner more or less moving on from the area. But Cerner there's a lot of people that have learned a lot of good things about how to start and operate a business at Cerner that we've already seen kind of fuel the startup tech industry in Kansas City. Arc Savings was part of that. I mean, our founder Mike Ray didn't work at Cerner; he was a pharmacist. But we've brought in a ton of talent at all levels of the organization from Cerner along the way. I think another company in town that's done quite well is Pay It. That I think that was started by a Cerner alumni. So that's
interesting.
as long as that startup industry keeps going and those startups continue to be successful and turn into mature and legitimate companies, then the city will continue to thrive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I hadn't heard that before, but I mean, to your point, I lived at One Light for a couple of years, probably 6-7 years ago, and I feel like everybody that I ran into at that time was working for Cerner, around our age, and so yeah, that was a major announcement. It's not shocking that they're that what's his name decided to go to Nashville, but that's a really interesting point that I hadn't heard anybody vocalize that there's still all that young talent from the Cerner world that brings their expertise and has ideas and can start up something like that and stay rooted here. I mean, that keeps, we can still keep a lot of the Cerner talent here. So that's cool. That's cool.
You guys know this from being in, construction, all these engineering, even great smaller engineering firms in Kansas City. It's because they all once worked at, Burns and McDonnell or Henderson, Beach. So, I mean, Cerner's the same thing like that, where you got that big anchor and then people leave it to start not, competitive business or just building on, the business. So,
well, and what I think is cool too, it's kind of a different story but similar subject. A lot of those firms, a lot of the design firms here in Kansas City that are even smaller firms, when you start talking to those folks, you learn that they're the experts that are handling projects all over the country, which I think is really cool. You kind of learn that a lot of these design, it's Kansas City is where a lot of these projects that are.
And you have Populous to thank for that.
Right. Yeah. No. Absolutely.
Seriously. Right.
And so I think it's really cool the reach Kansas City has, and I think that's one of the things. I don't think it's some secret anymore, and I think when we were growing up, it was kind of a secret of how great Kansas City was and what we're doing here. But I think everyone in the country knows about us, and it's not just because of Patrick Mahomes and Bobby Witt Jr., but it's because of what we have going on business-wise. And I think it's a fair point. Cerner, Oracle leaving is going to change the dynamic, but I'm optimistic and confident that there's going to be that next group that steps into that and leans into that. So
I honestly, it's really Missouri. So if you look at Kansas City, it's kind of the engineering, and St. Louis is the construction. I mean, huge GCs out of there. I mean, on a nationwide scale, it's like, oh, it's a Missouri company, involved in this one way or another.
MIZ.
Yes, you.
Well, leaning into sports a little bit, I think it was 10 years ago today, the Royals clinched their first playoff berth since 1985. So a win today does that if they can play in Atlanta, but I'm not sure.
The Royals' magic number is 1.
I think I watched anywhere from, and Jack did 260 to 70 games this year. It was like part of my job, It's like get off work, maybe go to the gym, and then throw the game on while you make some food. One
of the best parts about baseball when your team is good is that it's on every day. One of the worst parts about baseball when your team is bad is that you have to play every day. Right. So, but to your point, I love having it on in the background all the time.
You can do other things. It's not like football where you just got to be locked in. It's like, you can do other things, but then it's like, oh, Salvi Dinger, let's go. But he went on a slump, ever since Vinny. We were a few games from having the best record in MLB.
I know.
We're right there, a game back from the Guardians, and then all of a sudden Vinny got injured.
It was a tough month of September.
And then we had the worst offense and all of MLB. And then I saw that stat where it was like Salvi has had 1 RBI in the last 39 at-bats. I'm like, what? And he was always just lightning. But I'm happy to see. I knew this was going to happen. You got Salvi in that locker room. You got Bobby Witt. They were not going to let this season go to waste.
Yeah. So the Royals have an interesting stat. They're definitely the only team in baseball with this, where the last 3 times they've gone to the playoffs, they've gone to the World Series. So I'm not. I don't know if they're going to keep that up. Of course, they have to make the playoffs. They haven't quite done it yet, but if they do, there's a lot of good teams out there. So. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it is funny that now that you say that, there's all these parallels to the previous years, and it's like, oh, we made the World Series that year, so that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's happening.
That's because that's all we do. It's boom or bust, I guess.
Well, that's kind of just Kansas City in general right now. It's like we're all in.
Right.
But Tim had a crazy stat. It was like our pitchers went 25 scoreless innings well, guess what? Our hitters went 27 scoreless innings. So it's like,
Yeah, it's not as strong of a stat.
That's brutal.
Well, fingers crossed they'll kind of figure it out, and I think the Chiefs certainly have a long way to go, but it feels kind of like last season, but hopefully the luck doesn't run out.
Yeah, it's off to the right start.
Yeah, for sure. Winning kind of cures all.
It does.
But well, no, I don't want to keep you guys too long. But is there anything else with each of your guys, with ChopAir and RX Saving Solutions that you guys want to touch on? That you're looking towards the future. I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, but anything that people should be keeping an eye out for?
Or any positions you might be looking to fill or anything like that.
yeah. Well, that's nice to say. We're starting a tenant improvement to expand into 2,600 square feet in this current warehouse that we're in, and expanding within there.
Cool.
Taking on more inventory, and then the thing that people overlook is like we'll do a lot of pro bono engineering for you in those warehouse spaces. So we'll calculate the ventilation that you need, your heat loss. We actually are building a heat loss calculator that will be on our website here in about 2 to 3 weeks.
Cool.
So then, engineers and contractors will just be able to go on our website and put their building information in, and then boom. And then we'll help you with selections and layouts, and even write up the scope of work that you would need to give to subcontractors to bid your projects. So
Yeah, very cool. What do you guys have a website?
yeah, ChopAir.com.
Sweet. Very cool.
Simple and sweet.
And I would just say, not specific to my own business, but just encourage people that are in Kansas City or from Kansas City, keep your own talent here. Invest your sweat equity in this town if you're fortunate enough to have, wealth. Invest your wealth in this town. Continue to grow businesses here that fuels the flywheel for success of the whole city. So, we've seen that over the last 10 years for sure, and it's critical that it continues.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
For sure.
Well, guys, appreciate you coming on. It was fun having another set of brothers on.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Until next time.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Jens.
Yep.
Woohoo.